3 weeks before the ships arrived, a fire lit itself inside an empty shrine. Nobody was near it. Nobody could explain it. The priests of the Hachiman Shrine, the god of war, watched the altar burn and said nothing. That fire was a warning, and the man responsible for this island already knew what was coming. His name was Sukekuni, governor of Tsushima Island, descendant of emperors. And on the morning of November 5th, 1274, he walked to the beach anyway. He could count the ships. He just couldn't count the soldiers on them. And he went anyway. That is the question this video is going to investigate. What moves a human being toward a death they can see coming? Not toward it blindly, but with open eyes, with full knowledge, with every chance to turn around. To understand that, we need to go back 3 weeks, and we need to understand what Tsushima was and what it meant to the people who lived there. Tsushima sits almost exactly halfway between Japan and Korea. It is an island that has always been a threshold, neither fully one world nor the other, a doorway. For centuries, the people of Tsushima had survived by reading the sea. They knew every current, every weather pattern, every ship that passed. They were watchers. And in October of 1274, what they saw on the horizon was unlike anything in living memory, or any memory at all. Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis, ruler of the largest empire the world had ever seen, had sent his message, and the message was the fleet itself. He had sent letters to Japan 5 times before, polite letters, diplomatic letters, letters that said submit or be destroyed. Japan had ignored every single one. This was Kublai's answer. 900 ships. Somewhere between 23,000 and 40,000 warriors. Historians still debate the exact number. The scale was unprecedented. Against this, Tsushima could field exactly 80 mounted samurai. 80. That number is not a typo and it is not a metaphor. It is just the truth. Now here is the first thing most people miss about this story. Sukekuni was not surprised. He had sent warning dispatches to the Japanese mainland weeks earlier. He had described the fleet. He had estimated the numbers. He had asked for reinforcements, and the mainland had sent him exactly 0 soldiers in return. Nobody was coming to save them. He knew that before the fight started, and yet the morning of November 5th, he was still the first man on the beach. This is the moment we need to sit with for a second, because this is not a story about bravery in the way we usually tell it, as something effortless and clean. Sukekuni was afraid. We know this because he was human. The question is not whether he was afraid. The question is what he chose to do inside that fear. To understand that choice, we need to understand what these men believed war actually was, because it was not what the Mongols believed, not even close. For the samurai, war was a sacred ritual. Before combat, a warrior would ride forward, announce his full name, his lineage, his ancestors, his accomplishments, and then demand a worthy opponent step forward to face him. It was performance and proof simultaneously. You were saying, I am worth knowing, I am worth killing. Meet me as an equal or not at all. Now here's what happened when the samurai did this against the Mongols. They rode forward, they announced themselves, they demanded individual combat, and the Mongols laughed, not metaphorically. Sources record that Mongol soldiers literally laughed at the ritual, because to them, war was not a ceremony. It was a tool, pure, efficient, and completely without sentiment. The Mongols had conquered most of the known world by doing exactly one thing consistently, ignoring the rules of war that their enemies considered sacred. They had broken the Persian rules, the Chinese rules, the Russian rules, the Polish rules. Every civilization they encountered had a set of rules for war. The Mongols had one rule: win. And now those same soldiers were on the beach at Tsushima, advancing in tight formations with drums and horns, making a sound the samurai had never heard in their lives. The drums. That's something almost no retelling focuses on. The Mongol army used drums and noise as a psychological weapon, specifically designed to disorient opponents, panic horses, break formations before the first arrow flew. Samurai horses trained for the clean silence of ritual combat began to panic. The riders fought to control them. The enemy had not even engaged yet. And then came the explosions. The samurai had never seen gunpowder. In 2074, no army in Japan had encountered explosive projectiles fired from a fleet. It simply did not exist in their world. Imagine the sky itself detonating. That is not metaphor. That is the closest modern equivalent to what the samurai experienced. Fire from nowhere, thunder without clouds, the future arriving all at once. But here's the thing about Sukekuni and his 80 men. They did not break, not immediately. The records say they held the beach longer than any rational calculation would predict. The samurai archers, sources record, were devastating individually. One-on-one, a Japanese archer of this period was considered among the finest in the world. They were killing dozens. But for every Mongol warrior who fell, 10 stepped forward from the formation. The math was simply not survivable, and Sukekuni knew it. He had always known it. Now here's where the investigation takes a turn. Because the Mongols, historians note, were not behaving like an army trying to conquer an island. They were behaving like an army taking notes. Some historians now believe the 1274 invasion may have been a reconnaissance mission, a large-scale probe to test Japanese defenses, not a full commitment to conquest. If that's true, it changes everything. If this was reconnaissance, then Sukekuni was not defending against a real invasion. He was dying to delay a fact-finding mission, and the tragedy deepens in ways that are almost impossible to look at directly. But here's another layer that most tellings skip entirely. That morning at the Hachiman Shrine 3 weeks before, the fire that lit itself, it had also reportedly released a flock of white doves. In Japanese tradition, white doves from Hachiman are not a gentle omen. They are a declaration. The god of war himself was announcing, this is the moment. This is where it happens. Sukekuni had seen the fire. He had seen the doves. He believed, truly believed, that the god of war had chosen this island, this beach, this morning as a consecrated moment. This is not irrationality. This is a completely coherent internal logic. When you believe that your death has been chosen by the divine, the calculation of survival becomes irrelevant. There is nothing left to calculate. The battle raged through the morning and into the afternoon. The samurai were losing ground steadily, but they were not routing. They were dying in place. There is a difference. As evening approached, the remaining samurai, whatever few were still standing, made a cavalry charge, straight into the Mongol lines. No tactical sense, no chance of breakthrough, pure statement. None survived. The records are unambiguous on this point. All 80 men died on that beach. Not one is recorded as having been taken prisoner. Not one turned back. And now comes the part of the story that almost nobody tells, because the conventional ending is the storm of 1281, the divine wind, the kamikaze that destroyed the second Mongol fleet. That's the feel-good version. We are not going to end there, because what actually happened after Japan survived both invasions is more devastating than the invasions themselves. The samurai who defended Japan in 1281 expected what samurai always received after battle: land, reward, recognition. It was the bedrock of the feudal contract. You fight, you get paid. But there was no conquered land to give. The Mongols had been defeated, not conquered. There was no new territory, no plunder, no transferable wealth. The Kamakura shogunate had nothing to give the men who had just saved it. The economic strain of 2 massive mobilizations had already cracked the treasury. Samurai across Japan were going into debt. Estates were being sold. The loyalty that had held the feudal system together was quietly dissolving. By 1333, less than 60 years after Tsushima, the Kamakura shogunate collapsed. Not from another Mongol invasion, from within, from the samurai it had failed to pay. Japan had won the war, and the victory destroyed them anyway. The enemy that toppled the shogunate was not Kublai Khan, it was the cost of having survived him. Sukekuni's sacrifice bought Japan time, decades of time, but the system that time preserved destroyed itself from the inside with the same weapons it had used to survive. Now, here's the question that has been building since the first frame. Not the historical question, the personal one, the one that actually matters. Have you ever followed a set of rules? Your rules, the ones you built your life around, and discovered that the world you were playing in had already changed the game without telling you. The samurai announced their names. They challenged honorably. They did everything right. And the world they were playing against did not share a single one of their rules. Does that sound familiar? And this, have you ever won something, really won it, and then discovered that the winning had cost you something you needed more than the victory itself? That is Tsushima. Not a story about 80 men dying on a beach. A story about what it costs to hold a line, and what it means when holding the line is not enough to save what was behind it. So Sukekuni did not die because he had no choice. He died because in the system he believed in, the line between duty and self was not a line at all. They were the same thing. That is either the most beautiful thing about him or the most tragic, or both. History rarely offers a clean distinction between the two. The beach at Tsushima is still there. The shrine at Komoda, where Sukekuni is commemorated, still stands. Visitors still leave offerings. The island remembers even when the rest of the world has moved on. There is something about standing at a place where someone chose to die for an idea, where the ground itself absorbed a decision that has no rational explanation, that does something to the way you think about your own decisions. Because the thing is, we all have a beach somewhere, a moment where the math doesn't work, where the numbers are not in our favor, where every rational voice says step back. And in that moment, just before you decide, you are exactly where Sukekuni was on the morning of November 5th, 1274. The math is the same. The horizon is the same. The question is the same. What is the thing in your life that you would walk toward even knowing it might cost everything? And what does it say about you that you can answer that, or that you can't? Tsushima is not a story about 80 warriors. It is a story about the architecture of human commitment, what we are made of when the structure collapses and the only thing left is the choice in front of us. History does not remember the names of every one of the 80 men who died on that beach. Time erased most of them, but the beach is still there. And the question they answered with their lives is still unanswered for most of us. If this investigation left you with something, a question, a feeling you can't quite name, a version of that moment on your own beach, leave it in the comments. That conversation is the real one. And if you want to keep investigating, if there's another beach you want to walk down, another impossible decision you want to decode, subscribe to Epochal. There is always another story waiting on the horizon. Epochal, decoding the stories that built our world.